Genetic diseases are divided into two main categories. These are Mendelian and complex diseases. Before we begin on the differences between these groups, let me explain an important concept to be aware of in genetics. There is an ongoing debate in the case of certain conditions whether the disease is solely due to the environmental factors, such as an individual's lifestyle, their exercise, their diet, and their alcohol consumption, or due to genetics. In the case of a Mendelian disease, the disease can be totally attributed to the gene, as there is only one gene involved, and if a mutation should perturb the function of that gene, the condition that results is considered Mendelian. However, in the case of a complex disease, the disease can be the result of multiple mutations scattered across the genome. In the case of coronary artery disease, notice how the 9th chromosome aberration is not the only mutation involved. It is the combined effects of each of these associated mutations that increases a person's likelihood of contracting coronary artery disease. Having a single one of these mutations is usually inconsequential. However, having between 5 and 7 increases a person's likelihood of contracting coronary artery disease by 52%, and environmental factors nearly always have a role in complex disease contraction. LPL gene codes for lipoprotein lipase, which is a protein that's involved in the metabolism of blood lipids. There are different variants of the genes, and each different variant gives rise to a different risk. The combined effects of smoking and these variants can drastically alter a person's risk of having coronary artery disease. We see here that regardless of which variant of LPLs, as long as they're not a smoker, their risk of coronary artery disease is minimal. In the case of the D9 variant, the added effects of smoking increase the person's risk by more than 50%, whereas in the case of the N9 variant, the combined effects of smoking increase the likelihood over 400%. The combined effects of different variants of the genes associated with coronary artery disease, with that of external factors such as a person's smoking habits or their diet, are what make the predictability of complex diseases vastly more complicated than that of Mendelian diseases. And this explains why environmental and lifestyle factors do not usually have a major role in Mendelian conditions. Alternatively, in complex genetic diseases, both environmental factors and genetic factors are implicated. Furthermore, a single genetic test is highly predictive in the case of a Mendelian condition, as there will only be one mutation involved. Given that there are so many factors to consider in the case of a complex disease's predictability, a single genetic test is not sufficient to give what would be considered substantial information. Mendelian diseases, given their simplicity, are usually inherited between relatives. However, the study of complex diseases is usually population-based, as familial inheritance in the case of such disease is not always strong, and its prevalence through generations is quite sporadic and often random. Considering that Mendelian conditions are substantially more predictable than complex diseases, such testing has become commonplace in the case of many conditions, such as phenylketonuria, which is a genetic ailment that affects a person's metabolism of a protein called phenylalanine and can lead to mental retardation if not properly dealt with. Such testing is conducted within a framework of clinical responsibility. When it comes to complex diseases, the technology and information gained from earlier mentioned GWAS is not yet considered sufficient to enable us to make a reliable diagnosis. Tests for Mendelian conditions have been optimized for sensitivity and specificity, and hence a diagnosis of such a disease is considered reliable. In recent times, commercial companies have exploited the phenomenon of complex diseases, and although research into being able to make confident and reliable diagnoses based on tests for complex diseases is ongoing. Currently, tests are being sold online for potential profit, and under no circumstances do they accurately predict an individual's risk of contracting whatever particular disease.